The air above the Pamir Highlands was so thin that even the hardened soldiers of Viper Unit 17 breathed like old men climbing stairs. The jagged mountains stretched for miles, an endless labyrinth of rock, snow, and silence that could hide 100 enemy camps without a trace. This was where the last insurgent splinters had retreated, and where Viper 17 had been ordered to hunt them down. Among the unit was Elena Marquez, 27 years old, half Spanish, half Colombian. She wasn't the biggest, nor the loudest. Her compact frame barely filled out the combat fatigues, and she kept her black hair braided tight under her helmet. To most of the veterans, she looked like someone more suited to a desk job than a battlefield. "Rookie," Corporal Stein muttered as they checked gear before the insertion. "Don't let her near the sat phone. She'll probably try to call her mom." Laughter rippled through the group. Elena heard it but said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence could be a weapon sharper than any blade. The commanding officer, Major Ridley, wasn't much better. He assigned her the most thankless job, carrying ammunition crates and providing rear security. "Observation and support only," he barked. "No improvising. No heroics. Just follow orders." "Yes, sir," Elena replied, her voice steady. What none of them had bothered to read in her record was that Elena had graduated top of her class in land navigation and survival training at the academy. While others boasted about kill counts, she studied the stars, weather shifts, animal tracks. She wasn't the fastest shot, but she was deliberate, a sniper's patience in a rifleman's role. The team flew in under moonlight, rotors chopping the frozen air. Their mission: flush out insurgent hideouts across the ridgelines, dismantle weapons caches, and cut supply lines. But no plan survives first contact. The ambush came just as dawn painted the peaks red. Machine guns erupted from hidden caves, mortar shells arcing down onto the ridgeline where Viper 17 advanced. The ground itself seemed to crack open beneath them. Elena was thrown sideways, her radio smashed against stone. Dust and rocks swallowed her world. When she clawed her way back to consciousness, her ears rang with silence. No voices. No signals. No unit. She was alone. Elena's body ached with every breath, her ribs bruised from the blast. She blinked against the haze, dust settling into her lashes. The slope above her looked as though a giant hand had ripped it apart. Boulders dislodged, trees snapped like matchsticks. "Major Ridley? Viper 17, do you copy?" She rasped into the broken handset. Static only. The antenna was bent at an ugly angle, the battery cracked. Her first thought was to climb higher for line of sight. She scrambled up the ridge, boots slipping on loose shale, lungs burning in the thin air. At the top, she scanned the valley. Smoke rose in the distance, too much smoke for a small skirmish. It looked like half the mountain was on fire. She saw no friendlies. Only movement far below, dark figures swarming like ants, insurgents combing the slopes for survivors. Elena's pulse quickened. "If they find me, it's over." She checked her kit. Ammunition belts slung heavy across her shoulders, her own M4 rifle intact but dusty, sidearm holstered. 2 mags in her vest, 3 in her pack. A standard-issue field knife. No radio. No rations. Her pack with food and water had been torn away in the chaos. Her fingers brushed something else, a small, folded piece of cloth shoved inside her vest pocket. The unit's insignia patch that she had volunteered to carry earlier, tucked away almost as an afterthought. She stared at it, mud-streaked but intact. Down the slope, insurgents shouted in a language she half understood, rifles slung, dogs barking. Elena dropped flat, pressing herself into the earth. She could almost feel the vibrations of their boots. Memories of her survival instructor's voice echoed in her mind. "The mountains can kill you faster than bullets. Conserve energy. Hide your scent. Listen more than you move." She waited. Minutes dragged into an hour, the enemy patrols sweeping past but never climbing high enough to spot her. Only when silence reclaimed the ridge did she allow herself to breathe. She needed water. Shelter. A way to signal. and she needed to accept something brutal. No one was coming back for her. Alone in hostile country, Elena whispered to herself, steadying her own nerves. "You're not dead yet. Act like it." By dusk, the mountains had turned violet and gray, the peaks swallowing the last light. Elena picked her way down into a narrow ravine where shadows pooled like ink. Her lips were cracked, her throat raw. The dryness of high altitude clawed at her lungs, every breath cutting like glass. Water. She needed water. She crouched, pressing her ear against stone. Faint trickles carried through rock if you listened carefully. That was something she'd learned on exercises no one had taken seriously. Crawling on hands and knees, she followed the sound until she found it, a tiny stream bleeding out of the mountain wall, just wide enough for her cupped hands. She drank greedily, then forced herself to stop. Too much, too fast, would only make her sick. Night fell hard. The wind screamed down the ravine, numbing her fingers. She scraped together dead branches, half buried under frost, and built a fire so small it barely glowed. A fire could reveal her, but without it, she'd freeze. She thought of the others, Ridley, Stein, Martinez, and tried to picture them regrouping, maybe pushing through enemy lines. She told herself they were alive. They had to be. But hundreds of kilometers away, inside the fortress-like command post, the conversation was far colder. "Major Ridley, report." The brigadier demanded, arms folded. Ridley's jaw was tight. "We've accounted for all personnel except Specialist Marquez. Last seen at grid reference." He paused, then forced the words. "Lost radio contact during ambush. Drones show no movement at her position. No thermal signature." Sergeant Stein spoke up, voice heavy with something close to guilt. "Sir, if she was caught in that rockfall, there's no chance." Headquarters didn't hesitate. The clerk typed the words without ceremony. MIA, presumed Kia. Back in the ravine, Elena sat with her back to the stone, clutching her rifle like a lifeline. She had no idea that in the eyes of her own unit, her story was already over. A thin sliver of moon revealed her silhouette, mud-streaked, eyes red from smoke, a single figure against an endless wilderness. She looked down at the insignia patch she still carried and whispered to it, as if to the men who had left her behind. "You gave up on me too soon." The second night came colder than the first. Elena had managed to sleep in short bursts, huddled beneath a slab of stone, but hunger gnawed at her like an animal. Her stomach cramped, her thoughts grew hazy. She forced herself to think past the weakness. Water buys time. Food buys strength. Both keep you moving. Just before dawn, she heard voices. Two insurgents picking their way along the ravine, their rifles slung casual, a lantern swinging between them. They were searching. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She could stay hidden and let them pass, but they carried satchels, heavy ones. Maybe rations. Maybe intel. She steadied her breathing, flattened against rock. As they drew closer, she counted her options. Firing her rifle would give her away to half the valley. But she still had her knife. When the first man stopped to adjust his bootlace, she moved. Silent. Precise. Her hand clamped his mouth. The blade drew a swift line under his jaw. His body sagged without a sound. The second spun at the faint thud, and she was already on him. Her shoulder slammed into his chest, knocking him backward. His rifle clattered against stone. Before he could shout, she drove the knife into his throat. For a long moment she crouched over them, chest heaving, blood hot against her gloves. It wasn't the first time she'd killed, but it was the first time without a team, without witnesses, without orders. Alone, it felt different, raw, intimate. She forced herself to search their bags. 2 canteens. A pouch of flatbread and dried meat. A half-broken radio handset. Jackpot. She tested the radio, whispering. Viper 17, this is Marquez. Nothing. The transmitter was too weak, range limited to a few hundred meters. But the batteries worked. She pocketed them. By the time the sun rose, she had dragged both bodies into a crevice and covered them with loose rock. Not out of mercy, out of strategy. If the patrols didn't find them, they'd waste time searching elsewhere. That morning, two things changed. Elena wasn't just surviving anymore. She was hunting. And in the insurgent camp below, a commander shouted furiously when two of his men failed to report. "Check the ridges," he ordered. "Something moves in the dark." A shadow had been born. On the third day, Elena moved higher into the mountains, hugging the ridgelines where shadows stretched long. Her stolen bread and meat kept her going, though every bite tasted like grit. She rationed carefully, half for today, half for tomorrow. After that, she would need more. From a vantage point, she spied a cluster of insurgents below, 6 men hauling crates toward a hidden cave. She recognized the shape of the containers, weapons caches. Her orders had been to dismantle them before the ambush. Now the job fell to her alone. She couldn't storm them, not outnumbered. But she could slow them down. Elena steadied her rifle, the M4 cool against her cheek. She adjusted for wind, distance, and the thin mountain air. Breath in. Breath out. One shot cracked the silence. The lead man fell, a hole drilled neatly through his temple. The others scattered, shouting, firing wildly into empty rock. Elena was already crawling backward, changing position. She fired again from a new angle, clipping another in the shoulder. Chaos erupted. To them, it must have felt like death itself was circling the cliffs. By the time they regrouped, she was gone. Miles away at Forward Base Lancer, Captain Jonah Keene, the intelligence officer, studied intercepted enemy chatter. He frowned at the translation. "They're saying, 'The mountain walks at night.'" Major Ridley rubbed his temples. "Superstition. Locals make up ghost stories when they lose men." Keene slid a report across the table. 3 bodies. All single-shot kills. Minimal wasted ammunition. "Sir, that's not random fire. That's training. Ours." Ridley stiffened but shook his head. "Specialist Marquez is gone. We declared her Kia. Then who's out there doing our job for us?" Keene countered. Back on the ridge, Elena stripped another body of ammunition, her face smeared with mud to dull any shine. She didn't know that whispers were spreading, both among her enemies, who feared her, and among her own command, who didn't want to believe. That night, as she crouched beside her small, hidden fire, she spoke into the broken radio, even knowing it wouldn't reach anyone. "Viper 17. This is Marquez. Still alive? Still fighting? Still coming home?" Static answered. But saying it aloud kept her sane. By day 4, hunger had become a dull ache she carried like an extra piece of gear. The bread was gone, only scraps of dried meat left. Elena moved more slowly now, conserving energy, watching her surroundings with sharper eyes. Every shadow felt alive. She noticed it before she stepped into it, a wire glinting faintly between 2 boulders. A trip line, connected to a crude fragmentation charge hidden under loose stone. Her stomach twisted. The insurgents weren't just hunting. They were laying traps. She crouched, studied the setup. The charge was unstable, sloppily rigged. She thought of Stein back at the base, who had once joked, "You're book-smart, rookie, but you'll never outread a battlefield." Elena smirked bitterly. "Watch me." She carefully rerouted the tripwire, repositioning rocks so that the trigger faced downslope. Then she moved on. Hours later, the distant blast rattled the ridge. Shouts echoed in the valley, enemy voices screaming in confusion. She allowed herself a grim smile. That one wasn't for me. Still, danger was closing in. Enemy patrols grew thicker. She could see their lanterns sweeping the cliffs at night, hear the barking of their dogs. One evening, 3 men passed less than 20 meters from her hiding spot. Their laughter carried in the wind. She lay flat, motionless, mud covering every inch of exposed skin. One of them paused, sniffed the air, but then shrugged and kept walking. That night, Elena chose not to strike. Not every opportunity was worth the risk. Patience was survival. At the base, Captain Keen slammed another report onto Ridley's desk. "Sir, 2 more enemy bodies. Each with single precision shots. And listen to this, one of their patrols walked straight into a booby trap. That's training, sir. Our training." Ridley looked away. "Coincidence? Has to be. Or," Keen pressed, his eyes narrowing, "your rookie is rewriting the mission on her own." Ridley didn't answer. But for the first time, doubt flickered across his face. On the ridge, Elena sat alone, the insignia patch between her fingers. She stared at it, then tucked it securely back into her vest. "They'll see this again," she whispered. "One way or another." By the 5th day, Elena had stopped thinking like prey. Hunger sharpened her instincts, exhaustion honed her patience. She wasn't waiting to be found anymore, she was shaping the battlefield itself. From a high ridge, she studied the valley through her scope. Enemy patrols moved in predictable loops, lanterns bobbing, rifles slung. Between their routes, there were gaps, windows of silence she could slip through. She memorized them, hour by hour, until the patterns lived in her blood. That night she struck again. A lone sentry on an outcrop, bored and swaying with fatigue, dropped with one clean shot to the chest. By the time his comrades scrambled to his position, Elena had already moved, circling wide, erasing her tracks with pine branches. But she left something else behind. On a flat slab of rock near the body, she carved 3 small notches with her knife. Not random. Deliberate. To the untrained eye, meaningless scratches. To anyone who knew code, it marked direction of movement. Miles away, Captain Keen pored over the grainy drone footage. "Look here," he told Ridley, pointing to a still frame. "Near the body. Those marks aren't natural. That's navigation shorthand. That's ours." Ridley stared at the screen, his lips pressed tight. "And if it is? Then someone's alive out there. And not just alive." Thinking. In the enemy camp, fear began to ripple. Their commander berated his men. "This is not an army you fight. This is one woman. Yet she bleeds us like 1,000. Find her, or I will bury every last one of you." But still, men disappeared on lonely ridges. Still, bodies turned up with impossible wounds. Still, at night, whispers spread through the fighters, "The mountain hunts us. The ghost marks her path." Elena ate sparingly from another scavenged ration, her hands trembling less from hunger now and more from resolve. She looked up at the stars, finding the constellations her instructors had drilled into her. "If no one reads the signs," she murmured, "then I'll leave enough that someone has to." She wasn't just walking home. She was writing her way back. On the 6th night, the mountains felt wrong. The silence was too heavy, the darkness too staged. Elena crouched in a shallow ravine, listening. No random gunfire. No chatter. No dogs barking. Just stillness. She knew that kind of quiet. It was a hunter's quiet. Her suspicion sharpened when she spotted a faint glimmer. A reflective strip of cloth half hidden near a rock. Too neat. Too obvious. She studied the slope through her scope. Yes. There. A rifle barrel, just barely breaking the silhouette. Another glint on the opposite ridge. They'd set a kill box. "Nice try," she whispered. Instead of stepping into it, she slid downslope, low and patient, circling wide. Every move was deliberate, each shift of her boots muffled by earth. By the time she climbed above them, sweat ran cold down her back despite the chill air. She picked her target, the spotter. Always take the eyes first. One suppressed shot cracked, and he slumped forward before he even knew he was dead. His partner swiveled, panic flashing across his face. But Elena was already gone, repositioning. Below, the ambush line erupted into confusion. Men shouted, firing blindly into the dark. Elena triggered another shot from a different angle, dropping a second fighter. To them, it must have felt like the ghost again, everywhere and nowhere. The commander, hidden deeper in the kill zone, roared in frustration. Hold your ground. She is only one. But fear was stronger than orders. The line broke, men scattering downslope, abandoning rifles in their haste. Elena waited until the chaos thinned, then descended. She didn't take all the weapons, only the firing pins. She left the useless rifles stacked in a pile, with another 3 notches carved into the stone beside them. A calling card. Back at Forward Base Lancer, Keen studied the drone feed of the firefight aftermath. Look at this. Rifles disabled. No bodies recovered by enemy forces. And those marks again. Ridley leaned back, silent. He looked as though the weight of admitting the truth might crush him. Finally, he muttered, "If this is her, she's not just surviving. She's waging a war." In the mountains, Elena sat with her stolen canteen, her throat raw but her spirit sharp. They thought they set the trap. She murmured to the night, "But I'm not the prey anymore." The 7th day began with a mistake. Elena had been shadowing a patrol too closely, hoping to scavenge rations. She was careful, but not perfect. A loose stone tumbled down the slope, clattering far too loudly. The patrol leader swung his rifle, and instinct pulled the trigger before thought. The shot missed, but the return fire didn't. A round grazed her thigh, tearing through muscle. The pain was white-hot, staggering. She threw herself behind a boulder as bullets shredded the rock face, dust filling the air. She forced her breathing steady. Not fatal. Not yet. Blood streamed down her leg, sticky and warm. She cinched her belt tight above the wound, teeth grinding against the burn of makeshift pressure. The patrol fanned out, calling to one another in sharp bursts of their language. They thought they had her cornered. Elena waited. Pain dulled her focus, but training guided her. She counted footsteps. Waited for one to get too close. When a shadow crossed her hiding place, she fired once, point blank. The man dropped, screaming, clutching his chest. The others panicked. In the confusion, she crawled away, dragging herself through scrub until distance swallowed the gunfire. Every pull of her body left a smear of blood on stone. Hours later, she collapsed beneath a pine tree, her vision swimming. She forced herself to clean the wound with the last of her canteen water, hissing as the sting hit raw flesh. She packed it with torn cloth from her undershirt, hands shaking. It wasn't sterile, but it was something. As she lay there, fighting against the pull of unconsciousness, the enemy commander received the report, blood trail found, but no body. He clenched his fists. She bleeds, but she does not fall. Then she is not a soldier. She is a curse. At Forward Base Lancer, Keen studied fresh intel. We intercepted chatter. They say she's wounded. Ridley frowned. Then it's over. Keen shook his head. No, sir. If she's still alive after a week, a wound won't stop her. Not her. Under the tree, Elena whispered through cracked lips, her voice rasping but resolute. Still alive. Still fighting. Still coming home. 2 weeks after the ambush that should have killed her, a dust-caked figure stumbled out of the northern ridge. Her uniform was torn, blood stiff on her thigh, rifle slung with tape holding it together. Her face was gaunt, eyes sunken, but burning with the kind of light only survival could forge. Specialist Elena Marquez had walked through fire, hunger, and death itself, and now she stood at the outer perimeter of Forward Base Lancer. The young sentry on duty nearly dropped his weapon. Jesus, it's her! Words spread like wildfire. Soldiers poured from the barracks, voices hushed, stunned. Some whispered, "Ghosts!" Others simply stared, unable to reconcile the rookie they had dismissed with the survivor who had outlasted a valley full of enemies. Captain Keen stepped forward, expression unreadable. "Specialist Marquez," he said formally. "We had you listed Kia." Elena's lips cracked into the faintest smile. "Guess your paperwork was premature, sir." Behind him, Major Ridley said nothing. His eyes lingered on her, torn, bloodied, but alive, and in that silence was the weight of every doubt he'd ever spoken. He finally gave a stiff nod, more respect than he'd ever shown before. Later, in the debriefing tent, Keen spread out the maps. You crippled 3 supply routes, dismantled a weapons cache, disrupted patrols for nearly 2 weeks, all while alone and wounded. Elena shrugged, sipping the first clean water she'd had in days. Didn't plan it that way. Just couldn't quit. What she didn't know was how deep her legend had already sunk. Among insurgent fighters, stories spread of the mountain ghost who could not be killed. Among her own, her name was whispered with awe. In the weeks that followed, she was reassigned, commended, and studied, her survival lessons becoming doctrine. But none of it mattered to Elena as much as the simple truth she carried every time she touched the insignia patch on her vest. Still alive. Still fighting. Still home. And in the mountains she left behind, the echoes of her shadow march lingered, a reminder that sometimes the smallest, most overlooked soldier could change the shape of a battlefield.